It is so beautiful to see you.
I want you to want me.
Out there, live music lovers. Welcome to episode number 35 of First Concert Memories, the monthly sidecast from your buddies at the Ugly American Werewolf in London, where we have a guest on to talk about how seeing a rock act for the first time changed their lives or made for an incredibly memorable night. And I got to tell you, we're off to a heck of a start in 2026 on this. Going back to January 1st, we had our friend Amy Linden of I'm Gonna Let You Finish podcast talk about seeing and interviewing Amy Winehouse in her first ever U.S. tour. Then we had Oliver Wakeman on, talk about seeing his dad Rick on the big stage with Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and Howe in America in the 80s. Then we went to Brian Slagle, the founder and CEO of Metal Blade Records, talking about the first time out of hundreds that he's seen Iron Maiden in concert. Then we talked to our friend Steve Kilby of The Church, talking about seeing the Easy Beats as a young man and how that made him believe he could be a rock star when he grew up. And then recently we had Ryan Condal, the co-creator and executive producer of House of the Dragon, talking about how seeing Rage Against the Machine was so life-changing for him as a teenager. And tonight we welcome a friend of ours, Tim Derling from Tim's Vinyl Confessions. He's got an amazing YouTube channel, a podcast, he's an author, he's a DJ, and he's literally written a book about Sammy Hagar, and that's why we're going to have him talk about the first time he saw Van Halen. I know what you're going to say. We've been doing this 3 years, and this is the third Van Halen First Concert Memories, but they've all been different. The first time for First Concert Memories 2 that we did Van Halen was with author Greg Renoff, who wrote the book Van Halen Rising, talking about seeing them on the 1984 tour. Then we had our buddy Elon Fong from What's Hot in the Strip Clubs come on and talk about how he saw them on the 5150 tour. Well, because Tim grew up in Canada and some parts of Canada Van Halen didn't visit very often, he really didn't have a great chance to see them until the Balance tour. And since it's been a little more than 30 years since Balance, and we did review Balance on the show, not our favorite, but it's a Van Halen album, so we reviewed it, we thought it'd be a fun way to catch up with Tim and let him tell his story about coming over the border into the United States, into Maine, to finally see Van Halen in concert. And yes, we know that Balance is not everyone's favorite, but he loved it, and because he'd never seen them before, he couldn't wait to see them live. And of course, our entry point was on the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge tour. So it's interesting to see how Van Halen was so important to so very many people and how it affected their lives, and when they come into the story, when they got to go see them live. So it's a fun conversation we had with Tim, and we're going to get to that here very shortly. But first, we do have a little bit of business to take care of. We love to mention we are proud members of the Pantheon Media Network, a family of over 100 different shows. You can learn more at pantheonpodcast.com or follow on socials at Pantheon Pods. And you know we're going to give a shout out to our intergalactic sponsor, rarevinyl.com, who's based in the UK, folks, but they ship all over the world and they procure collections from all over the world. Yes, they have great Van Halen stuff, but with over 250,000 items in stock, they've got a lot of great stuff. So whether you're looking for singles, imports, picture discs, box sets, CDs, DVDs, LPs, they've got it. And what's great is they've given us a code UGLY, UGLY. Use that at checkout and you can save 10% off one entire order. Not just one item, folks, but one entire order. So if you want a first edition print, but you also want that box set, but you also want that single that's so hard to find, buy them all and use UGLY and save a big fat 10%. So go to rarevinyl.com, use the code UGLY, save 10%. Your record collection will thank you. Now back to Tim. He's like us, right? He's got all this knowledge and passion for music. He loves rock and roll. He's Canadian, so he has a little bit different perspective of it, but he's done over 800 episodes of his show. He's written, I think, 7 books or so. He's on the radio and he loves rock and roll just like we do. And so let's do it. We're going to talk to Tim from Tim's Vinyl Confessions about seeing Van Halen on the Balance tour in 1995. Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Thanks so much for joining us here on First Concert Memories.
Thanks for having me. This is great. It's always good to talk to other music fans out there, and yeah, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, we followed you on socials for a while, and we've kind of hit at each other a couple times, and you're like, you want to do something? Like, hell yeah, we've got to have some overlap, and I bet you've got some. I can see behind you, you've got some stuff that I'm not familiar with. You must. I mean, as big as your collection is, you must know some stuff that we don't. But we are pretty big Van Halen fans, and in our regular show, the weekly show, Ugly American Werewolf in London, we might do a classic Van Halen album review, or concert review. Might have artists come on, talk about what they're up to, stuff like that. But for First Concert Memories, we're really just kind of taking you back to a moment in time where you went to a rock concert and maybe you were full of anticipation for it and it let you down, or you thought it'd be a regular night and then something wacky happened, or it was the greatest night of your life, or whatever it might be. So we've done Van Halen before, but we've never done the Balance Tour. And of course, it's been 30 years, right? This is it's been 30 years since Balance. So, it'd be a good time to kind of reflect on this kind of thing. So you gave us the kind of basics. Now, did you grow up in Maine, or did you travel for the show?
I traveled for the show. So I've lived most of my life, except for like a 2-month period. I've always lived in New Brunswick, which is the province of Canada that's on the border of Maine. Right. And so I grew up half an hour away from the border. So, and I had relatives that lived just across the border in a little town called Holton. So it was nothing for me to get tapes and CDs in the States. And then, and so Portland, Maine, Old Orchard Beach, I should say, which is somewhere around there. Probably about a 4 or 5 hour drive from where I live, but it was doable.
Okay, yeah.
And Van Halen's not a band that played the Maritime Provinces. I don't know if they ever played the Maritime Provinces of Canada with Sammy. I know that famously the Fair Warning Tour started in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is our neighboring province.
Yeah.
Why it started in Halifax, I have no idea, but it did. I would have been too young to go to that. But when I found out they were coming to Old Orchard Beach, I said, I got to get a group of buddies together. We got to go do this.
And how old were you then?
So I would have been just short of 21.
Okay.
So this was August 6, 1995. It was a Sunday night.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So, Jackson, I guess we were about 18 when we saw our first Van Halen shows on the Carnal Knowledge Tour, yeah?
Correct. Yeah. I think this is very interesting because when you said Old Orchard Beach, I would have thought they would have played somewhere else in Maine, like Portland or something, but okay, because I've been to Old Orchard Beach, and it's not a very big place.
No, well, see, it's not my first concert, because I remember asking, does it have to be my first concert? Not that I'd mind talking about that, but it was my first outdoor concert, and I don't know how many people were there. Looked like it was the biggest crowd I'd ever been in at that point, but like I said, I hadn't seen many shows at that point. So yeah, they've played Portland plenty of times. A lot of bands, Portland used to be our regular stop.
Right.
I've seen quite a few shows there.
This appears to be like a minor league baseball park, correct?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, sounds about right.
Okay, because I was going to ask if it was a shed, that kind of has the covered area down there, and there was the big lawn where you can stick a bunch of people on that. But
sounds about like that. Sounds like a shed, they'd call the shed tour. But yeah, the Balance Tour, got off to a rocky start because there was illness and stuff. Didn't they call it the Ambulance Tour for a while?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I was just, at this point in time, Van Halen was my favorite band because I got into the band with 5150 being the age that I am, and
right.
I wrote a book about Sammy's solo stuff. So obviously I'm a huge Hagar fan too.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen them. And this is the one and only time that I saw Van Halen and or Sammy in any incarnation.
Wow. Well, you still got a chance, I guess, to see Sammy this summer.
That's right. Yeah.
Doing all that stuff, but
nothing anywhere close to me, unfortunately.
Well, I'm sure that, yeah. And then Van Halen is certainly done.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that makes sense. So, because you're just a little bit younger than we are, right? And so, we got into 1984 because that was our age, and we had MTV, right?
Yeah. The 1984 videos, that was my first exposure to Van Halen. I certainly remember. But by the time 1986 rolled around, I was a little bit more serious about paying attention to popular music and starting to get to the point where I was actually purchasing albums rather than just recording songs off the radio. So 1986 was a pivotal year for that. So, but yeah, I'd heard of Van Halen as of 1984. Before that, no, wouldn't have had a clue.
Gotcha. Did you watch them on Much Music, or was it like Friday Night Videos, or?
Yeah, Much Music. Yeah, that's good. That Much Music was our MTV. We didn't get it in our area until early '86, but yeah, once once it was on, I watched, anything that had videos on it, I was just fascinated by anyway.
And why's that? Why's that, Tim?
I don't know. I just, the idea of these little mini movies set to music, I just thought was the coolest thing. I mean, that's why it's, it's the MTV generation, right? I mean, I don't know how many times when I was younger, we used to go down, and it was a Van Halen connection here, but we used to rent the video cassette of the making of Michael Jackson's Thriller video. I don't know how many times we rented that cassette. The video was on it, but it was like a 45-minute.
Oh, yeah. Behind the scenes, John Landau and, Rick Baker and everybody. Yeah.
So I remember just being fascinated by the whole thing. I remember seeing the Jump video. Jump would have been the first thing I ever heard of by Van Halen. And just, who's this guy? Who's this singer? He's doing the splits and he's with the colorful clothes.
He's got like a lion's mane, look at this guy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was just about the right age for me to start appreciating guitar-based kind of music. I mean, I was like so many, it was like a lot of kids my age, 10, 11 years old. I mean, Phil Collins, Huey Lewis and the News, stuff like that. I mean, I always like Bryan Adams, still do. But Van Halen were like a friendlier type of, hard rock band.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they weren't all death and it was about sex, but it was kind of, double entendre sex.
There was nothing, they weren't Motley Crue, they weren't Wasp. There was nothing menacing about them.
Yeah, that's
nothing threatening looking about them. So it was easy to, and the music was catchy, right? I vividly remember hearing Why Can't This Be Love for the first time and just being like, who's singing? Who is that singing?
Right.
This is I'd listen to this guy sing anything. So yeah, I mean, I was a fan. But by the time that obviously 1995 rolled around, I was Died in the Wolf fan. I mean, the first Van Halen album I bought brand new was OU 812, so I was just following along ever since. And this is a hint of things to come. I was so not a fan of grunge or alternative or anything like that, and I love the fact that Van Halen was like beating the odds, and they still had a #1 album and a double platinum album. They were still getting radio play and video play despite everything, all these, the rock is dead, or traditional 80s rock is dead, or whatever you want to call it. It's hard to explain to younger people, but it felt very real at the time. It felt like an us versus them type of situation. And the fact that Van Halen was still rolling along doing good business, which is why it made all the less sense a year later when that fell apart. I remember being very disappointed with that. But
right. Oh, I understand.
Yeah. But when I found that they were coming, somewhere close to our area, I'm like, we can do that. Also it's a time when it's like, can somebody drive? It's like, well, why didn't you go see them? I was like, I would have had to have gotten a drive. Like there are practical concerns that come up that sometimes I never had any older brothers. I didn't have any older cousins that lived handy that could have taken me to concerts. So I didn't start going to concerts until I was 18 years old when I started going to concerts. So I didn't get that early start. So this was still pretty early days for me for seeing shows.
Yeah.
So when you heard they were coming around, you said, and to Maine, which was close enough. This was your mission. You said you got everybody together, said we're doing this.
I used to be, it's funny. I used to have a lot more, I don't want to say ambition, but it was very important to me that I let everybody know in my friend group. It's like, hey, we should do this. We should absolutely do this. I remember there was a radio station that was in Maine, and I heard an ad, and this was how early days this was. They had just switched formats, and they kept calling themselves the New Q. And I was trying to get, this sounds like so old now. You had to dial the directory and ask the operator for a number. It sounds so, write it down on a stone tablet and send it by carrier pigeon, right?
Right.
But I didn't know what the station was called. And so I kept listening. And finally the top of the hour came up and they played their station ID, WQHR, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, okay, well, at least now I know what the station's called. So then I called the operator, got the number. And again, this would not happen today because there's nobody there at night.
That's right.
I know this because I work in radio. But somebody was there, and I said, hey, can you give me some information on the Van? I heard the ad for the Van Halen concert. Can you give me some information? They gave me a number to call for tickets. So yeah, it went from there. There ended up being 6 of us going.
Oh, wow. That's a good crew.
3 in one car, 3 in another, because 3 of us decided we were going to be cheap and drive home, which was probably not the smartest thing to do.
Wow.
We were pretty tired.
Yeah.
3 wisely decided to get a hotel. We should have done that too, but we didn't.
All right. Well, it's good to hear you're on the right side of the grunge thing. I mean, by this time, Jackson and I, we weren't anti-Van Halen. It's just we were so into Van Halen for so long. And then Carnal Knowledge comes out. We see him on the tour. There's lots of hit singles. The live album comes out. It has singles basically from, the last album too. But so we're all about Van Halen. I don't know. We had just gotten a little bit older. Our tastes had changed just a little bit. And we were like, Van Halen are kind of old heroes. We didn't love the Balance album. The first couple singles came out like, that's not great Van Halen, and that's not really what we're into now. So we didn't chase Van Halen for this tour. And we kind of stayed away from the album for a long time. We finally did the review for its 30th, but we still didn't love it. Like, over time, for us, it didn't age well. How about for you? I mean, did you love it at the time, or does it change your opinion now, or how do you feel about it?
Well, I bought it when it first came out. I heard "Don't Tell Me," and I'm like, that's amazing. They got heavier. Nobody gets heavier. I couldn't believe that song just blew me away. I know what you're saying, though. Like, of the 4 Sammy Hagar albums, it's probably my least favorite, but I still really like it. Okay. And as I actually just listened to it this morning, actually, and I've come to really appreciate some of the album tracks like Deja Vu and Aftershock, and
we love Aftershock. Yeah,
but I bought right into it. There's no question. I was fully still my fan. I was flying my fan flag high. And For Lawful Carnal Knowledge ultimately is my favorite of the 4.
Really? Okay.
I've called that my favorite Van Halen album, period.
Really?
Like, to me, that's one of those albums that there's not 1 millisecond of wasted space. That's just my opinion.
It is pretty good. We've kind of been holding off for it to turn 40. We didn't do a 35 on it, Jackson. But look, you can't take away what 1984 to us because of the time in our lives that we, found it and all that kind of stuff.
1984, I mean, I didn't hear the entire album. The funny thing is that I didn't hear that entire album until 1988. I bought the cassette off of one of my cousins when I was visiting.
Okay.
So that was actually my first Van Halen album, but I didn't get it for 4 years. I mean, I'd already heard half of it. Right?
Oh, sure, on the radio, yeah.
Half of it was singles, but Drop Dead Legs and Top Jimmy, I love all that stuff. And it's a short album.
Yeah.
All those first 6 albums are pretty short, but throughout the year 1988, I ended up getting all of the albums that were out. But 1984 was my first, so that's a very important album for me. And I still remember that time period. It makes me think of going to the carnival, going on rides and getting sick and fun stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, just that, seeing those videos, like seeing the Jump video takes me back. And I still, every time I hear Jump, I still want to hear Dave go, oh, right before the last chorus. I still expect to hear that, and I never do.
It never does.
But, yeah.
Because it was in the video.
But when Balance came out, I was fully on board, and there was just no question, we've got to go see this show. I guess even if I wasn't really so much into the current album, we were like, hey, Van Halen's coming. We got to go see them.
Hi, this is Steve Hackett. You're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London.
Well, and you must have, if you rented the making of Thriller all those times, you must have rented Live Without a Net until it ran off.
Story about Live Without a Net is fun because I didn't actually own that until the DVD came out.
Oh, wow.
But Much Music used to play concerts on Saturday nights. I think MTV did too. I think all the video stations did. But they would either there'd be concerts specifically for the channel, or they would rerun existing ones. And once they reran Live Without a Net, probably early '88. But it just so happens, actually, it was the same trip I ended up buying that 1984 cassette for my cousin. So I set my VCR, because we were going to be away, I set my VCR to record it. But for some reason, I thought that it was only on for an hour.
Uh-oh.
But it wasn't. So I only got about as far as Eddie sitting down for his solo.
Oh, that's the worst part, to lose it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that you sit down, you're like, okay, here we go. No. Okay, something's wrong.
You know what? I think I knew, because we were kind of watching it away.
Uh-huh.
And at a certain point, I realized this isn't just going to be on for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So you knew you missed that back part then.
Yeah. But I'd seen, as we know, that's what they played for videos, like Love Walks In and Best of Both Worlds, 5150. Those were the videos. So I was very familiar with it. But it did the trick. First time I'd ever heard There's Only One Way to Rock. I didn't know that wasn't a Van Halen song. I didn't know that was a Sammy solo song. I didn't know very much. I was learning. No, I had a lot to learn.
Well, that was weird because we were talking about that a little bit when we reviewed 5150. They started with that track. That was the first one that you heard with Live Without a Net. So yeah, you would think well, they're not going to start with a solo track.
I didn't have any expectations really, but looking back on it, it does seem like, wow, they took a lot of chances. Not only, not doing a lot of Dave era stuff, opening with a Sammy solo song, doing a big chunk of 5150. They were, obviously they were very proud of the album, but they obviously also had that issue of, and I still think this to this day, Dave should sing Dave's songs. Sammy they're just too different as singers.
Yes, so, but you've got this catalog and you've got these huge
You've got this catalog, but I don't understand why they didn't just realize, hey, you've had a really good background singer here for years now in Michael Anthony. Give him, they could have given him Somebody Get Me a Doctor way back then. They didn't need to Sammy didn't need to be on stage for those times. They could have done a few more older songs, but they didn't.
Nope, they chose not to. And really, since he joined the band on the 5150 tour, there weren't too many Dave songs. There were a few more than were on this tour, but they didn't do too many.
But the thing is, too, is they also had the luxury of doing what so few bands are able to do. They continued having hits.
That's right.
So they were building their own catalog. It's pretty rare when that happens. If you think about it, there's not many times that a band can survive losing a singer and still be anything anybody cares about.
Especially over 15 or 20 years. Yeah. Absolutely. No, and
that's usually you're right down to the state fairs.
Well, that's right. And Jackson and I were talking before you came on, it's not that odd for a band to want to play a bunch of songs off their new record, especially if it's a number one record, which it is, and just because I didn't really love them and some Van Halen fans didn't love it, it's still going in the charts. The singles are still charting and selling. So there's no reason not to believe that, we're just Van Halen. We're kind of above all this grunge stuff, and we'll just kind of keep doing our thing. Obviously, there were tensions within the band that we didn't always understand.
I had no idea. I had no idea. That's why it came as such a shock to me when that fell apart, because they looked like they were having so much fun.
Yeah, just best buddies. They live near each other.
Total pros, man. Leave it all backstage. When it was time to go on stage, they did their job.
Yeah. No, there are no bad show reports out of this tour. I remember I didn't go see them, but there was a pay-per-view special that they did from somewhere that they roped me into buying.
They filmed it in Toronto.
The Toronto? Yeah, okay.
This is why everybody was saying, why did they put that Wembley show out, which was them opening for Bon Jovi? It wasn't even a complete headline show when they've got that Toronto show professionally filmed. As you guys know, Van Halen the Van Halen camp does some strange things. Just things that just don't make sense. But they had that footage ready. Yeah, they filmed it in Toronto, which the only reason they filmed it in Toronto is because that's where Ray Daniels was, based out of their current manager, right? Which that Sammy would say that was the main reason it fell apart. But yeah, and that was, from what I remember seeing, that was pretty much the set that I saw.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember. I've got it on VHS, so I can't really watch it right now. Yeah. So that's a problem. All right. Well, now, do you guys party on the way up there? Did you get there early so you could tailgate and listen to some tunes? What's your pregame?
We were pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to drive and drive back. So
that's right. Yeah. I was never much of a partier, but when it was time to go see a show, I wanted my senses clear. I wanted to remember things. And I also didn't want to, we were in a different country. You don't want to get arrested for being drunk and disorderly in another country. That's just right. Not a good, So no, basically by the time, seems to me, we left early Sunday morning. And like I said, it was 5-6 hour drive, and we'd stop for gas and we'd stop for, bathroom breaks, whatever, stop, get something to eat. So it was we got there maybe mid-afternoon. I don't remember it being an extremely long time that we were waiting.
Okay.
But I can remember parking, we parked side by side, both our vehicles, and then the six of us walked towards where we just followed everybody else. We really didn't know we were going, but we saw a bunch of people wearing Van Halen shirts and just in rock tees and in general, and we just kind of followed them until we ended up outside the venue or the gate, which is where we ran into our first disappointment of the night, but we'll get to that.
All right. Well, okay. Okay, we'll get to that. Who was who opened for him that night?
The disappointment. So we didn't know. On that tour, I bought Metal Edge regularly and read it, and we were thinking, is it going to be Collective Soul? Is it going to be Brother Kane? Like either of those would have been cool. And I know Skid Row were opening some of the shows. We were all Skid Row fans.
Okay.
We really didn't know. But when we got there, we saw all of this. So Skid Row at that time, oddly enough, both of those bands, that was the last tour they did in those lineup, or, you know, Skid Row never did reunite, but they were on the album Subhuman Race, which I was not a big fan of, but I was a huge fan of the band. We get there, we see all of these Skid Row Subhuman Race posters. And just about the time we start to go, holy, you know, is Skid Row opening? Yeah. Like this is, you know, the tickets just got twice as valuable. Like we had no idea. But then we look closer, canceled. Skid Row will not be appearing at tonight's show. You know, if you want to get your refunds, there's the. So we were like, I mean, we were there to see Van Halen.
Right.
That was the goal all along. But just for a split second, we thought we might, you know, get 2 for 1 and see another band that we really liked at the same time. But what we got in their place was Our Lady Peace.
Oh, goodness.
And one of the only times I've ever been embarrassed to be Canadian. And look, I know people like that band. I hated them. They were like the poster child for everything I hated about alt rock. It was the vocals. It was everything, you know, not doing guitar solos and just the whole, I know they had guitar solos. I just was not a fan, like emphatically not a fan.
And a dumb name, Our Lady Peace.
And I'm like, we're getting this instead of Skid Row. This is the best that they could do on short notice. Like, come on. So whatever, right? You know, so that was, but I do remember, I mean, you know, as we got closer, one of the highlights I will always remember is we could hear Van Halen sound check.
Oh, nice.
And they sound checked with the Seventh Seal, first song off, Balance. And one of the first things, like I hear Sammy belting off into the mic and we're like, oh yeah. It's going to be the night. So, Our Lady Peace absolutely sucked, but to their credit, this was early days for them. And like most opening acts, they had terrible sound. It just wasn't, nobody booed, but I just was kind of like biding my time. Like, come on, get off the stage.
Yeah. Well, where were your seats?
They were all outdoors. So I remember that, if I recall correctly, 3 of us ventured closer to the front. And I don't like pushing and shoving and sweaty and all of that. So me and my other 2 buddies, we kind of hung back. There were no bad seats. Like we were probably, oh man, it's been such a long time. We definitely weren't right up front, but we also weren't in any place, you know, there wasn't going to be any fights break out.
Yeah, okay.
Or there didn't end up being any. Yeah, so we didn't really have seats per se. We stood the whole time.
I gotcha. Okay.
So you were like on the infield.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there was you were definitely going in. I think there were bleachers. I don't know if they were sold or not. Yeah, it's funny, the things you remember, the things you don't remember. But the more I get talking about it, I'm remembering more about it. And I remember it was one of the strangest openings to a show because there was no big, ladies and gentlemen, Van Halen. It was none of that. Out of nowhere, we heard the riff from Don't Tell Me start of dun, 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 like, and then here comes the band just walks side stage onto the stage. And for the first few bars, the only thing that the conclusion we all came to is that Sammy could not hear. He didn't have his monitors because he was really out of tune, like very out of tune.
He was that bad.
Yeah. Till about the second half of the first verse, then it cleared up and it was fine.
Okay.
But he must not have been able to hear. That's the only thing I can figure, but I don't know if they opened all their shows like that, but all of a sudden there they were playing. There was no big fanfare, no big build up. Of course it was outdoors, so it was light out, so you didn't have it got dark as they played on, but yeah, that's still one of the strangest openings to a show I've ever seen.
Yeah, because usually they have some kind of music, even if they're not playing it piped in, so you know, okay, here we go, we're going to start in a minute or something.
And you didn't even, a lot of times you'd hear, Eddie would be making his elephant sounds or something. Yeah. None of that. Just dun, 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 dun. Holy shit, there they are.
Wow.
Well, almost catches you by surprise.
Yeah.
Well, and so they ripped through a lot of new songs. I mean, the first 13 songs, there was nothing from the Dave era on there. They ripped through, in the first 8 songs, 4 of them were the brand new ones, right? So
yeah, they did a lot of balance. I wasn't as meticulous as I would later become. Of course, there was no such thing as YouTube, so I was like, well, what the heck difference does it make if I write the set list down? But I wish I had.
Yeah.
Because Setlist FM is only as good as what people contribute. But I do remember they played a fair chunk of balance.
Yeah, definitely. And, we had a thing. We lived in Orlando when we met, and one of the rock stations there, when there was a big band in town, they'd be promoting the show, they'd be down at the show, and they'd have somebody kind of transcribing the set list. So then right after the show was over, when you're getting in your car and you're driving home, they would replay studio versions of the set list for you.
I like that.
Which is kind of cool, because it's a fun way to go home.
Yeah,
and then
idea.
We had a buddy, because we heard this, we got to record that shit, right? So we had a buddy said, look, come into our room and, just hit record as soon as they start doing that, and then we'll be home as fast as we can. And basically we got home in time, to flip the tape and get the second side. So we always thought that was a good idea, and more stations should do that.
It's a great idea. I've heard telestations just playing a lot of whoever it is that's just played, but didn't necessarily follow the set list. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, give people who are there something to enjoy, and the folks who couldn't make it, well, here's what you missed, right? Yeah, so kind of cool. All right, so they do Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do. They do Big Fat Money. Then they go into Why Can't This Be Love from 5150, Top of the World from Carnal Knowledge. These are not heavy-duty songs, Not Enough's not bad, but then you get into the sick bass solo with the Jack Daniels bass. Was he spitting the Jack Daniels that night? Do you remember?
I don't remember Mike's bass solo. No. I really don't. And I always wish when bands did that, I always wish they'd just play more songs. I'm kind of, But Why Can't This Be Love? First of all, it's one of my all-time favorite songs, not just Van Halen, but anybody. But what I remember about that, and I think they did this on a few tours, but it's the first time I'd ever seen it. When it comes to the second verse, Mike would start to sing the first half of it, and then Sammy moves the mic over to Eddie. All I know, you've got to run to win. I'm like, this guy can sing too. So they split the second verse up, and I remember everybody was like, that's the coolest thing.
That is cool. Yeah, I dig that. Well, that's cool. And I'm glad you got Mine All Mine. After they did 7 Seal in Amsterdam, they did Mine All Mine. Now, I was looking at setlist.fm, and they didn't play that. They only play that on maybe about a third of the shows or something like that.
Boy, I don't remember Mine All Mine, but I mean, if it says they did, they probably did. But I mean, I would imagine I was pretty excited because that's a great song.
No, it's a killer song. And if you didn't get it, they probably would have given you Finish What You Started, which personally, I don't like. I think it's kind of a country song. It's not very Van Halen. I think Mine All Mine is a much better Van Halen song than Finish What You Started. But I know it's a hit. Some people like it.
I remember, they definitely did Not Enough because that was the single. That was the current single
at the time, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember they did There's Only One Way to Rock about halfway through, and or maybe more than halfway through, but something happened to Sammy's guitar. It wasn't plugged in, or it didn't, he made some joke. My one chance to blow Eddie off the stage. And I remember Sammy did Eagles Fly acoustically.
Yep.
And as we know, those solo songs would, cause some friction, or probably already were causing some friction, especially at this point in time. But we didn't know that, right?
That's right.
As the set list goes, I'd have to look at the set list to say, well, I remember when they did that. I do remember them doing Big Fat Money. I do remember them doing Not Enough for sure. They must have done Can't Stop Loving You because that had just been a single out for them. Can't remember if they did Amsterdam or not, but
they did.
Looks like they did.
Yeah,
they did.
But the solos, obviously the drum solo and the guitar solo, and watching Eddie's guitar solo is never a bad thing. thing. Yeah, it was. We all really enjoyed the show. Like,
well, that's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, you go there wanting to enjoy the show. You know,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I bought a shirt which is now on the ceiling because it's stretched over canvas now, but I still got my tour book.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, which I miss tour books, by the way. At a certain point, I stopped seeing tour books on sale. But yeah, no, this was pretty cool. It was I think this was the first tour book I ever bought with a website in it. See it all on the internet. vanhalen.warnerrcrds.com/balance.
Yes, nice short one there.
And I remember being, like, why are the albums out of order? Why is, the Sammy albums are all out of order?
Why is that?
I don't know. And the other thing, this was when I first realized, when I started reading for the staff, that Alan Fitzgerald, key tech, I'm like, hey, that's Fitz from Night Ranger.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Of course, he goes back with Sammy all the way to the second Montrose album, because he replaced Bill Church on the Paper Money album.
Ah, gotcha. Well, you have in-depth, deep knowledge of Sammy. You've literally written a book about him, right?
I wrote about Sammy, and I wrote about Night Ranger. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and we want you to get to that, but I'm going to get through the set list a little bit here, because after Sammy does Eagles Fly, then it kicks into some older school stuff. Ain't Talking About Love, which Sammy was always happy to sing. Then the guitar solo, which obviously has parts of Eruption and Mean Streets and Cathedral and 316. It's got it all in there.
Well, that's the funny thing about that short bit of, like, when the Live Without a Net video was cut off for me, there was enough of it there so that when For Unlawful came out and I got to 316, I'm like, hey, I've heard that melody before.
That's right. You know that. Yeah, of course you do. And then it goes right into You Really Got Me, because after Eruption on the first album comes You Really Got Me. And then there's Jump. And then they go to There's Only One Way to Rock, which is cool because, like Sammy said, he does play. Sammy's not a bad guitar player.
No. I mean, he's very self-effacing about it, but I mean, he's spent his career surrounded by Ronnie Montrose and Eddie Van Halen and Joe Satriani. But he's a perfectly good, functional guitar player in his own right. Like, he's not a virtuoso, but he can hold his own as a lead player. Some of the stuff that I don't know, I never was sure, because I never saw any live, not a lot of live stuff, but on those albums, I didn't know which was his and which was Gary Peel. But one of my favorite things to listen to from Sammy solo was his first live album, All Night Long, from '78.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And they do an extended version of Bad Motor Scooter, and he and Gary Peel trade off solos, and it's all good.
That is cool, yeah. All right, well, then, they finished with Dreams and Pound Cake and Right Now. Of course, Right Now was such a big hit on the last album, but you go to the major tour stats, and for the most part, you saw all the main ones that he did throughout the tour, but they did switch some out. They did Panama almost every night on the tour, but I guess they decided not to do it for you guys. That's kind of a bummer. They did Aftershock most every night of the tour, and when we did our review, that was one Jackson actually like, okay, that's a hell of a good song. That's kind of like my favorite song on the album.
Yeah,
it's really damn good.
It's fantastic. Yeah,
and they did Runaround most of the time too, because obviously that's a big hit. Now, you can't do all of these every night, but that one did make it either. So, I mean, when did it come out? Did it come out in May of '95? When was that? Was it
Balance?
Yeah, or was it like early?
No, 95? Balance came out in January. It was like really early in January, because I think Don't Tell Me, I first saw that video the end of '94.
Okay, gotcha. All right, that makes sense. So they did over 100 shows, so they probably started touring fairly early in the year. So here you are in August. This might be towards the end of it,
It is, yeah, because I think the tour ended in October. So yeah, they were on the downward in more ways than one. Winding down. Yeah,
winding down is a good way to put it. Yeah, okay. So favorite moment from the night, Tim? What was it?
Musically, it was Why Can't This Be Love when Mike and Ed did part of the vocals, just because I'd never seen it before. I mean, obviously, Michael's been such a, he's the MVP of the background vocals, no matter what the era, until he wasn't in the band anymore. But I had no idea Eddie could sing lead in any capacity.
Neither did I.
Maybe a lot of, older fans probably already knew that. I didn't. But I know there was one other cool thing. Like I said, there was three of us that stood back, three of us that went ahead. My buddy Bob had a hat. He threw it on stage. Sammy put it on. Sammy was like putting on people's hats. They'd throw them on stage. Like, I wouldn't do that.
Because it sounds like a bad idea, honestly.
Sounds like a recipe for lice. The next time you see them on stage, he's bald, right?
Dumb idea, Sammy, yeah.
But he threw it back, and I didn't know. We didn't know until we all got back to the cars. He's like, Sammy, I gotta wear my hat.
That's cool. I mean, that's a special story. That's awesome, yeah.
Hi guys, this is Chris Slade, drummer of AC/DC and many others, and you're listening to the really ugly Werewolf in London.
Well, what about, like, besides it wasn't Skid Row and it was Our Lady Peace, was there another disappointment on the night?
Not really. No, not really. I've been to concerts where, there's been idiots acting up and, security is a little bit lax and, and then you sometimes feel a little unsafe. And there's always that chance when you're in a big group of people, you're going to get one loose cannon. But I don't ever remember feeling that. I just remember feeling like, wow, this is amazing. This is like, at the time, probably I would have said they were my favorite band, and there they are.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
And was the sound good? I mean, the outside's always kind of a wild card.
I don't remember not being able to make out anything.
Okay.
And back to the drum solo for a second. I can't remember if I'm just getting it confused with the Right Here, Right Now live album, but I don't know if Alex started his solo with that bit of Pleasure Dome, or if he just... I'm not sure.
No, you may be right about that. That wasn't in the notes from your thing.
Seems to me that Pound Cake was the first song of the encore, because they had left the stage, and then like they came on stage, it was out of nowhere. We heard
right.
We heard the drill going. It was like, oh yeah.
That's some Pound Cake right there.
Yeah, no, I feel like I had that note when we did that, Jackson, is that he would throw some of that in there, at the beginning of his drum solo, like Pleasure Dome, yeah.
And I also want to say, I think that before they did one of the songs, and this has sort of been talked about, where like Eddie, and probably Alex too, were itching to play some of the earlier material, that they played a little bit of just the riff from Running with the Devil before they started another song, but I can't remember that for sure.
That's interesting, because they were still doing a little bit of covers here and there on this tour. Like once in a while, you might hear a rock and roll by Led Zeppelin, or once every blue moon. You might
don't remember
hear
them
cool.
doing any covers other than, of course, "You Really Got Me," which was a recorded Van Halen song. I do remember Sammy commenting on how aromatic the audience was, and to the point of ask, is it, does it grow naturally on the side of the road here?
Well, yeah, it's frozen most of the year, but once the thaw happens, there's a lot of it, man. That's cool. Well, all right. So tell us, because I know you never saw them again, and you haven't had the chance to see Sammy. You ever see Dave solo?
No, I never did. It was just never anywhere where it was close or where it made any sense, monetarily, unfortunately. I know they did play in Bangor, Maine in 2015, the very last tour they did.
Okay.
And I can't remember what else was going on, but I just wasn't able to go. But I some friends of mine did go, and I think it was, they said it was good. Dave was Dave, right? But it's still, but I remember thinking when Eddie died, because that was a rough year, because I'm a huge Rush fan. And the year started out with Neil Peart dying. And I remember I've never met these people, but it just felt like a real loss. Like,
oh yeah,
wow. But I got to see them in Toronto in 2004. But then when Eddie passed away in October, I remember thinking, only got to see them once, each of them. But at least I got to see them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, and Rush is one of the best, one of our top bands here on the show. It's the only band we've camped out for. I saw them 12 times, and we're going to see them a 13th time this summer. Can't wait. But yeah, you might still have a chance to see old Sammy. But all right, so I assume that you didn't really do anything except jump in the car and then drive 5 hours in the dark.
That's pretty much it. Yeah, we drove and got some gas, and we basically drove into the sun. The sun came up, and I remember. It's that stupid, fatigue will kill you, right? Because you're not paying attention. We're like punching each other. We're switching drivers. And if I recall correctly, we were listening to Iron Maiden very loud.
Oh, good.
Just so we could stay awake. I remember listening to Seventh Son of a Seventh Son for some reason. I remember that stands out. And we took a wrong turn. So we ended up like doubling back like a half an hour until we actually got to the border. But, what I remember about, I remember getting home and crashing and then waking up in the afternoon and just being like, wow, that was awesome. and picking up the tour book, and you just remember things from the show. You start looking through the tour book. That's one of the reasons I miss tour books too.
It's a great memory booster, really. I mean, you just, the next day, or if it's 20 years later or whatever, to go back and see that's what they looked like then, and that was the style, and that was the tour, and that was the stage, all that kind of fun stuff.
I was going to say, at any point in that drive home, was there, we probably should have gotten the hotel room. Shut up. 4 hours in, we still got
I don't think it was ever verbalized,
but it definitely.
But since then, we've all said, we probably should have spent a little bit extra and just gotten a cheap hotel and gotten off the road. But we're here. We're all here to talk about it. So
yeah, that's the important thing. Why don't you tell our listeners about your books and what you're up to and how people can find what you're doing, whether it's socials or wherever.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, my channel is called Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I've had it going since 2014, and for the last a little over 4 years now, I've managed to put out 6 books, which is pretty weird because I had no plans on becoming an author. But my first book was called Unspooled: An Adventure in 8 Tracks, and that's mainly about the fact that the record clubs kept putting 8 tracks out, making them available all the way through 1988, which is weird because most people think of them as fading out in the late 70s. And so that was my first one. Ever since then, every other book has been on one specific band or artist.
Okay, yeah.
And so the next book I did was on one of my favorite bands of all time that is unsung to millions of people, and that's Y&T. They're one of my all-time favorite bands.
You gotta have Sonny Pooney on your show so you guys can geek out over Y&T.
I've chatted with Sonny, no, and for such a relatively obscure band, that's still my best-selling book by a pretty wide margin.
That's interesting. Although, look, it's not shocking. How many books are on Iron Maiden or Van Halen? Or,
I don't think there had ever been a book on Y&T. I think that's still the only one. So people are like, finally, they
found it. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You filled a need.
I thought so. I mean, I always thought they should have been superstars, and this is basically presenting the case and why I think that is. The next book I put out was on the band Kansas, another favorite band of mine who have had some books, but they hadn't had one exactly like the way that I wanted to do it. That book was called Let It Be Your Guide. That was a pretty good seller. The one I put after that was this one, Red on Black, The Listener's Guide to Sammy Hagar, and this is strictly about Sammy's solo career. Of course, there's mentions of Montrose and Van Halen and Chickenfoot, but I don't think people realize how many albums he's done. I don't think people realize how prolific he was. I mean, one of the things that Alex and Eddie would always say after, 96 that just really bugged me was that he's lazy and he didn't want to work. I'm like, he's put out so much more music than you guys have.
Okay, Eddie, you're an alcoholic. You sat there for years.
Yeah, so much wasted time, right?
Yeah.
It's funny you say that because I remember thinking that when they went their separate ways, he had that record, what was it, Marching to Mars?
Yeah.
Really quickly after that.
That's my second favorite album of his. My favorite overall is Three Lock Box. Love that record to death. But Marching to Mars I love because it's so personal, and I can feel his pain in that album. He didn't want to leave Van Halen. He figured he would grow old and, retire with those guys.
Yeah, and play stadiums.
Like he said, why on earth would I leave a band? Why on earth would anybody in the right mind leave Van Halen? That'd be, but anyway, obviously I followed his career all the way through, and not all of his albums I like. I'm not a big fan of the acoustic sit by the beach and strum your guitar stuff.
I hear you.
But I like a lot of it. And I wanted people to know exactly what's out there. And so that was the next book I did. Then I did a book on another band that we've talked about, another one of my favorite they were well known, but they should have been bigger. And that's Night Ranger. They're one of my favorite bands. They're just great melodic hard rock, fantastic vocals, guitar playing, lyrics, the whole thing. I just think, and another band that's put out a lot of new music and it's really good and nobody knows about it. So, and there'd never been a book about them, which is even more surprising to me than Y&T.
It's a little surprising. They were pretty big.
Considering they had some platinum records, right? Top 5 singles. And not that I know of. To this day, like it's been out for a couple of years, no one's come to me. Actually, there was a book about Night Ranger, news to me, because if there had been, or on Y&T, I would have just bought it. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
As a fan. And then the most recent one I did was a little bit of a left turn, but I still really enjoyed it. It was on Fleetwood Mac, and it's called The Sound That Haunts You. And I call it a beginner's companion because that's a band with such a vast catalog with so many different sounds.
It's true.
So many different lineups. And so that's my current one. And as we're speaking tonight, I'm on the verge of getting a proof copy of what's going to be my 7th book. So in another month or so, I'll have another one out there in the market.
Well, good for you, man. Way to keep at it and keep being prolific and crank it out. I mean, your 814th episode is out live right now on Yes Is From a Page, which is awesome. And we like that era of Yes. We've had Oliver Wakeman on our show a few times.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Oliver and I have one thing in common, although he doesn't know it yet. But a friend of mine named Kevin Mulrine, who runs the...
we know Kevin. He's been on the show.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So Kevin put out that awesome book on the Tormato album.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in that book because I'm talking about the 8-track version of Tormato.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Nice.
So Oliver and I are both in that book. Yeah. Kevin's a great guy. Look, yeah, I like my classic rock. I like a little bit of prog, and I'm very excited that in August, speaking of going to see bands, at the Atlantic provinces of Canada have never been a hotbed for classic rock.
Okay.
But this, actually not long ago, I had the pleasure of one of the greatest shows I've seen in a long time, in a band I never thought I'd ever get to see. I saw Triumph with April Wine.
Oh, so sweet. Wasn't Todd Dammit Kearns playing with Triumph?
Todd was there. Phil X was not there. I guess it was a Bon Jovi gig somewhere that night. But in his place was a guy named Derek Sharp, who was good singer, good guitar player. He was in the last incarnation of the band calling themselves the Guess Who before Randy Bachman and
Turner
Cummings sued the name out of them. But no, he was great. But that was fantastic. I'd always been a fan of Triumph. Never ever thought I'd go get to see them. But in August, my son and I are going to see Deep Purple in Kansas in Halifax. So very much looking forward to that.
That'll be great, man. That's awesome. Yeah, cool. All right. So if Sammy were to come to Portland with Joe and Mike and whoever they've got on the drums, I think it was Kenny, but it was Jason Bonham for a while, but I think it's Kenny now. Would you make one more pilgrimage?
Oh my goodness. I'd really have to think about it, but I always think the same thing. Why can't you guys hop across the border? It's a lot easier, but you got to go where the fans are. And I understand that, another place that a lot of bands play, it's a little closer than Portland, is Bangor.
Okay.
Which, anybody that reads Stephen King, that's where he's from. But I've seen plenty of good shows in Bangor. As a matter of fact, you mentioned Jason Bonham. I guess it's been about 8 years ago now. It was a great triple bill my wife and I went to see, but Jason Bonham opened with his Led Zeppelin tribute.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That was great. Then Whitesnake, and then Foreigner. So that was a great.
That's a fun night.
Bill. Yeah. Let me just mention real quick. All of my books are available through Amazon too. No matter what part of the world you live in, they're all whatever your local Amazon is.
Excellent. Well, Tim, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your passion for Van Halen and for rock music and all the knowledge you've accumulated over the years. And goodness, man, 7 books about to be and over 800 shows. You're sharing that knowledge and passion with the world. We appreciate that. We've got a ways to catch up, but we're glad to have met you and be able to share a little time with you here, man.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to like-minded people. And you know what? A lot of it is just years and years of combing through liner notes and reading the rock magazines, and you don't even realize you're taking all that information in. But the next thing you know, you can remember the most obscure facts.
We know.
But when my wife says, "What do we need for groceries this week?" I don't know.
Well, we know. I mean, yeah.
I can tell you that Bob Ludwig did a heck of a job remastering. You know what I mean? Like, just go into this obscure stuff, right?
Yeah. My son had a couple of friends over the other night, and one of them was wearing, they're 18 years old. One of them was wearing an Offspring Smash t-shirt. And I just looked at him like, that's the largest selling independent rock record ever made. And he just looked at me like, okay, whatever. Thanks for that.
You gotta find your appreciative audience, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. Could not have cared less.
Which is why we started the show, because when we tell our friends and family, they do not want to hear it.
Oh, look, absolutely. It really is. It's great, and the books are an extension of the channel for sure.
Excellent.
Well, as soon as you can release the information on the new book, put it out there, let us know. We should have you on the main show sometime. We'll pick a album having an anniversary, and we'll do a review together.
Would love that. Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, bud. Well, many thanks. All the best. Everybody check out Tim's Vinyl Confessions all over YouTube and elsewhere. And check out his books. You can get them on Amazon. Thanks, Tim.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
It was good of Tim to join us on First Concert Memories, talking about seeing Van Halen for the first time. Of course, we didn't check out that tour. That was the Balance tour that we just were not into Van Halen at that point. Plus, like I said, they started off inauspiciously. They called it the Ambulance Tour. Eddie had some health problems. There was some stuff going on. Just personally for me and Jackson, we had moved on. But thankfully, Tim hadn't, and he got to see his favorite band of all time live at least once. And he still has a chance to go see Sammy and the boys do some Van Halen tracks. And he was generous to us, folks. He sent us both his Red on Black book on Sammy Hagar with the foreword by Greg Ranoff, who was on First Concert Memories 2, talking about Van Halen. And he sent us the Adventure in 8 Tracks, Unspooled, which has a foreword by Martin Popoff, who is part of the Pantheon Podcast Network and has been on our show a couple of times. And he's written, 150 books maybe, even more than Tim. But it's great to see folks who aren't necessarily authors by trade take their knowledge, take their passion, and share it with the world. And now he's about to have his 7th book come out. That's fantastic. Good for him. And I'm sure that we will have him back on to talk about whatever he wants to talk about, maybe share some stories from the road, maybe talk about his new book, maybe talk about an album that he loves a lot and that we do too. We're just proud of the community we've been able to build here, and obviously Tim's built one for himself, and there's a lot of overlaps. So there's a Venn diagram between guests and shared love of music. I bet there's a lot of overlap between Tim's Vinyl Confessions and the Ugly American Werewolf in London, and certainly First Concert Memories. And it's good to hear his perspective, just because we never really saw the show. Yes, we may have seen the pay-per-view, but I feel like Van Halen were on their last legs at that point, both as an entity and as everybody's favorite rock band. So the world had changed, they had grown up, a little bit of a lineup change, and of course it all kind of unraveled after that. Yeah, they came back together to do a Sammy tour, which we attended, which was great, and then they got back together with Dave to do some songs that had been laying around for a long time. You can't deny how big they were in the 80s and even into the 90s. This is kind of the last gasp. We appreciate Tim sharing his thoughts of the last days of Van Halen. And we want to know, folks, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? Or let us know which of the first bands you saw live, which really turned you on, which made you an all-time rock fan, which nights were crazy when you got arrested or beat up or lost your friends or whatever. You ended up backstage for some reason. Email us and let us know. It's uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. You let us know the bands that you first saw, the bands you want to hear us talk about on the show, whatever you want to talk about. You can also follow us on socials. We're on most everything: YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Facebook. See what we're up to, share your stories, and make sure you download and subscribe to our show. Those downloads are the lifeblood of growing the show. And if you really want to help us out, please go give us a 5-star review. It just means the world to us. It helps us find more rockers like you and Tim. And if you send it our way, we might just read it on an episode. Thanks as always to Pantheon Podcast for making us part of the family, and thanks to our sponsor, RareVinyl.com, where if you use the code UGLY, you can save 10% off one entire order. That's it for this month. We've had a great run so far this year, and we've got some more great stuff up ahead, so you're gonna have to stay tuned. And until next time, make sure you keep going to see live music. It's the only way we're gonna keep rock alive.